So Evo's direct in. We have a channel ready for his guitar. It's channel 1. He's going to play and give me some signals so I know how loud it is. Great. And I'll ask him, do you want to record with the metronome or not?
No,
Without it. So he's going to listen to just the music and play. So I can arm this track, and he can play for as long as he wants and until he gets the track right. So I'm just going to wait until he's done or he feels comfortable. Right? Variety. Maybe that sounds better. Maybe it sounds worse. Who knows? Cool. So what part of that last little bit?
Yeah, sure.
Okay, so here's where warping is going to be important. I want him to start here. I want him to start there, but look, I'm trimming a little bit of that off. Maybe that's not what I want. So maybe I need to turn the grid off, make this the start point, or make this the start point. And these are the parts of editing that people don't teach you. You've got to get used to this yourself, and you'll realize what you need to tweak and what you don't. So cool. I can bring this to start right there. Let's see how it sounds. And I'm just going to solo it. And we're going to put the grid back on. Okay, cool. We can add a noise gate to get rid of that little slide, or you might want to keep it because it sounds good. We won't make it too complicated today. So now if we play the whole scene here. Oh yeah, we had that pad from before, remember? Sorry, so we need to change the notes because they're not the same notes. So it's the same chord. And the D comes in on the second measure. And I know that's a G that we played here. It's not the right note, I can tell already. So G. Done. And we had that kick drum muted, so let's bring it back. Okay, you know, nothing special, but we're getting there. Okay, then to add spice, really, and then from here on in, if you got the workflow right, it's just a matter of editing, etc. So maybe now would be a good time to ask if there are any questions, and we're going to move into EQ compression and how to use them creatively. Are we excited for that? Yeah? Good? Okay, interrupt me if you guys have any questions. Okay. So we'll go into this piano, we'll tweak it. Is anybody here familiar with what an equalizer is? Yeah? You guys have used it in DJing, I assume?
Yeah.
What are some things you guys know about EQing generally? You can yell them out. How have you used them before? What is it good for? Where can you use EQ?
Your like sound, right? Yeah.
That's right. Sorry?
Taking those frequencies you don't want.
Yeah, exactly. Notching out and cutting. Awesome. Thanks for coming.
Thanks.
Okay, so let's drop in EQ, which exists on all DAWs. Play to this piano again. Right? Does anybody know general rules for EQing? They say that in your mix, you don't want a bunch of low frequency information coming through on every track. because all that bass will add up to really muddy mix at the end of the day. So some people make a habit of high passing everything, putting in EQ on every channel, putting a filter at the bottom, making sure no low frequency information comes through, turning it on, and like putting one of these on every channel. Some people live by that, and it might actually be a really good practice in some environments. I tend to do a lot of it, but the more experienced you are, the more technical of a studio you're in, a studio monitoring studio, you'll be able to determine, do I need to high pass this, or can I let a little bit of the sub-frequencies of the piano through? You'll make those calls on your own. For this piano, I don't know if I need that much. Take out that low rumble. One rule for EQing, let's go to this PowerPoint here. Tips to a better mix. So when you EQ, you want wide boosts and narrow cuts. Is anyone confused by what that means? Over here. Okay, so EQs basically can boost or cut frequency information. So what happens if I were to, what I mean by wide and narrow is the band or the amount of frequencies I'm talking about. Narrow banding or wide banding. So if I boost the high frequencies of this piano track like this, by clicking and dragging, I can select it here, choose what frequency I want to boost, and then add some gain, right? And you can sweep around and find the regions of interest, right? You can use that as an effect too. You can modulate this, right? Sounds like a Rhodes all of a sudden. And it's funny because Rhodes instruments get that sound from having synths that do this automatically, right? And you can automate that to the time of the song too, very easily in Ableton. We'll do that in a bit. Wide boosts and narrow cuts. When you boost something and it's wide, it boosts something and it's narrow, like this. If I were to decrease the Q and I were to boost a very narrow frequency because I just wanted to hear more of something, that might be important. But if I want the piano just to sound better, this is not something I would do. I'd be like, it needs more upper end, so I'm just going to add upper end. It sounds more trebly, but it also sounds honky. So when I boost, you want your boosts to be wide, and that'll add warmth to your mix. So you add wide boosts by decreasing the Q. So let's bring this all the way up. Look what happens when I bring down the Q. It affects a wider band of frequencies. Maybe it's that much. And when I bring it down to here, and I want to add just a little bit of warmth in the middle of the piano where it's richest, just that warm rumble, lower frequencies. Not here. It's not doing anything, right? Just a little here. Always A and B your EQs. Whatever you do something, stop, don't listen to it for too long, take the EQ off and on. There's a lot of extra stuff down in the lower. Sounds a little warmer all of a sudden, right? And I don't want to boost too much in EQ. Use levels to get your gain. Don't be like, well, it needs to be louder in the mix, so I'm just going to make sure I add a lot of EQ or boost here, or increase this gain here down at the bottom. I don't know if you can see that, but that's just an output gain. You don't have to change any of that. So wide boosts and narrow cuts. So a little wide boost here. And if I want to cut something out of the mix, that's when I use narrow. So I find the part of the piano I don't like. High Q, really narrow frequencies. Sweep around till you find that annoying frequency. There's something there, right? You can see that there's a little bit of a... And it might be that the piano has a little bit of a bell sound to it that gives it that clarity. Maybe I want to take that away, maybe I don't. But say I did. So we'd find that frequency. Yeah, it's a little annoying right there. It's got that bell, you guys hear that? So then I center around it, I make the Q really narrow, and then I bring the gain down just like this. I don't cut like this, and I don't cut like that. Okay? Wide boosts, narrow cuts. And A and B, so let's go back and forth. Since I got rid of that frequency, maybe I still want to retain some of the clarity of the piano. By the way, this applies for all instruments, okay? If I want to retain some of the clarity of the piano, which is a vocabulary to express the higher frequencies, I might want to put a shelf. So I throw on one more of these automators here. It's a shelf. You can change what type of function it has, whether it has a bell or a shelf. I'll change it to an upper end shelf and add a little bit of clarity. Look what happens when I add a lot. If you heard that piano on its own with nothing else, it would would sound like a very bright and clear piano. And they do that sometimes in commercials and movies where they add a lot of sub and they add a lot of hi-hat to make it feel like a movie theater, right? So if this was on a movie soundtrack, this is how I might EQ just a solo piano for a movie trailer. I'll have that clarity up here to make it come across in radio frequencies, but I'd add a lot of, I'd keep the sub information and I'd add some sub. Bring the volume down here. This is how I might EQ for a movie trailer, but not for a hip hop song, right? Because it's gonna take up all the rooms for the drums. So let's go back. So wide boosts at what? At about 300 hertz. And there's great resources online to be like, the character personality, all the frequencies have personalities. At 250, there's usually mud in an EDM mix. At 12,000 hertz, they call it air because it sounds like it's sizzling air. At 1,000, which is the 1,000 hertz was the range of human voice, they have that presence. So if I boosted at 1,000 hertz, I would give it presence. So use that vocabulary to determine what you want out of a sound. So piano should be okay. So we leave that boost there, a little clarity in the drums, in the higher end. Piano's done processing. Let's talk about, that's EQ, so let's go back for a second. Clear so far? Helpful? Not helpful? Interesting? Boring? Just let me know. Okay, tweak in the context of your mix. So we're almost done talking about EQ. So wide boosts and narrow cuts, and don't EQ the living out of everything. Use EQ subtly. EQ should almost sound like it's not there. Here's what I mean. Play all the tracks together. Right? The piano seems like it's hidden somewhere in the back versus... And I didn't increase the volume. I didn't change the recording. I didn't go in and crank the volumes. I just EQ'd a little bit to give presence, and I took away an annoying frequency. That's EQ. So tweak in the context of your mix like I've done here. Okay, next we're going to talk about compressors. And one of my favorite things to talk about because it's really cool. Compressors are awesome. The compressor is almost your most effective and versatile production tool because it affects a dynamic range. People think compressors are usually meant to get your sounds louder. Let's rethink that. A compressor is used essentially to make the quiet parts of a recording as loud as the loud parts. It's not meant to make the loud parts louder. You use gain to do that. You use a compressor to make the quieter parts of the played expression match the loudest parts, and it does that by decreasing the volume of the loud parts. Okay? So let's look at a compressor. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to duplicate this piano track. Sorry, I'm going to put a compressor on this piano track, and if anyone is unfamiliar with compressors, it's basically turning down the volume. It's like somebody sitting, before they had a compressor, they had somebody sitting here, and they'd do this to the piano. They'd solo the piano, and if the recording was too loud, this is what they do. Like you do at a party where you only have a mixer and you're trying to keep the MC volume, and it's coming away from the mic, and you're riding the volume to make sure the recording is at the same volume. Instead of doing that, you use a compressor because anytime it hits a certain volume, it decreases it and at a rate that you define. The ratio that you define is the ratio here. The threshold here is when it kicks in. The attack is how fast it takes to start decreasing your volume, and your release is how quickly it lets go of that decrease in volume. And you'll hear the difference as much as see it. This is what a compressor looks like in real time. Left to right is time, up and down is volume. Without the compressor, this is what it sounds like. Okay, what we're going to do is we're going to use the compressor to get those quiet piano notes. So a compressor will make the expression of those lower notes louder by ducking the loud parts. So we bring a ratio that's reasonable. You can look up the best ratios for the instruments. Guitars like 1:2, pianos like 1:8, vocals like 1:4. You'll find it's different for all things. I find a ratio that I like, and then I start bringing down the threshold until you can see some gain reduction. Let's play that over again. See, it increased the volume because of an algorithm that's in this plugin. Right? And then we can bring down the output volume, and we're going to A and B it. So we're going to A and B it by keeping it the same volume. So when I take it off, it should be the same volume as when I play it or turn it on. And you can do that by rapidly turning it on and off to see if there's a difference. Okay, and now we're going to bring down the threshold a little more, increase the ratio, bring down the threshold a little more. Okay, so off, listen to those quieter notes. Versus, you hear that? You hear that difference? Just ever so slight, you can hear those first initial bit. That's what a compressor does at its basic unit. And then you have your output controls, and you can use this attack and release, which are the most important parts of the compressor, to see how fast it squashes the sound. So I'm going to use a ratio of, say, 2. I'm going to what I'm going to do is I'm going to freeze this track, okay? And I'm going to make a new audio track just to visualize what's happening here. I'm going to take this track here and I'm going to move it to here. So you have a visual representation of this clip. This clip versus this clip. Notice how the variation in height is different. So let's unfreeze this. Go back into this, choose a ratio that's much higher, say 3 or 4 to 1. Freeze this one, make a new track, give a copy over here, go back into this one, have infinite ratio, low knee. We're going to make the volume, it's what's called brick line or brick wall compression, right? And we're going to freeze this one. Freeze this one, make a new audio track, copy it over. Now we can see what the compressor is doing. It's hard to hear it sometimes if you're not used to listening to it, but let's look at what it did to these tracks, okay? Okay, so if it looks like the first one we did, it's progressively getting louder. This is the first one we did, 5. This is the second one we did right here, and this is the third one we did. So at a low ratio, the dynamic range, if I were to increase the volume here, the difference between the highest points and lowest points is, say, this much. If I go to this piano clip now, and I make it the same volume, the difference between the high points and the low points is going to be narrower. So the waveform is going to start looking more and more like a brick and a solid block instead of an expressive, moving piece of audio. And let's hear the difference in sound for these. So we're going to keep all the volumes at 0, 0, 0, 0. Let's hear the difference. Here's the first one with a low ratio, gentle ratio. And I'll make sure the volumes are all peaking. When a compressor does make things louder, you want to make sure that you're bringing the levels to match so that you can actually hear what the compressor is doing and not getting tricked by the volume, okay? The next one. It sounds almost like it's strangled in a box. And we'll make the volumes the same here. Okay, and then this one. Okay, so the volumes. Okay, notice how as we increased in ratio, we've had to decrease the volume more because the waveform is more and more like a brick. So now let's listen to them. They're all visually. You can see that they're all in similar volumes. So we'll look at this one here. You can almost hear that hum and rumble of the piano. Listen as we go across. Notice how we went from left to right through these channels. The piano seemed to breathe a little bit more on this side, and it seemed to be more punchy and full on this side. That's how you use a compressor. You use the ratios to get that effect. What I liked was the breathiness of this first one. So we're going to delete all of those, and now we know that the ratio we want to use for that audio track is going to be gentle. We want like, what, 1 to 6 ratio. So that's what the compressor is doing, and it's changing the dynamic range. hats, they seem kind of static and they seem kind of lackluster. They seem like robotic. So what I can do, decrease the volume, go into this, add an effect. These effects can be used in all contexts. So we can go into a little bit of a reverb or a delay to give the hats a feel like they were played by a drummer, which you can never duplicate for all the drummers in the room. You can't duplicate what a drummer does, but you can trick the ear into thinking there's more going on.
It's like he knew.
So let's listen to these hats on its own without the delay. But if I wanted to shuffle, I'd turn the delay on, give a repeat with 3 notes or 4 notes of a delay, and this is what it sounds like after. So the feedback is how much it keeps repeating. Dry, wet is how much of that repeated sound you want versus the not. And subtlety is key. So let's listen to it in the mix. Without the delay. It sounds like it's almost like you're listening for more. Let's turn it on now. And it's a lot. It's really present. So maybe I don't want it that bad. So I'll decrease the feedback and make it a little drier to take away that effect. Even less maybe. High frequency information cuts through the mix. So if you have a little bit too much of it, it's going to be a lot too much, okay? And all I need for you to notice it is just a little bit. So I'm going to decrease the wet even more. Some people love to do this. Oh, there's a delay. Oh, great. But now that's all you're going to listen to for the whole song is this. You're distracted by it. You can't hear the song. So maybe something like this. Just a little. And these subtle things are what, like I said, separates a good mix from a bad one. You can go in and change the kick drum. It doesn't sound good. You can change those snares or whatever. Say I wanted the drums to sound a little bit more like they're splashier, and this is we're getting into how to make beats sound as good as you want them to versus how to make a beat. The beat is pretty much done. I could arrange it, put the bass line at the beginning, take it out for the middle, have a rapper sing a rap verse, and have a song, generally. But when it comes to making your sound better, maybe I want to take that clap, that snare. This is the one I want to use. Okay, so I'm going to go into the snare. I'm going to drop a reverb on it because I only want that snare to give the audience or the listener the sense of how big the room is or how big the space is. So let's throw a reverb on there and then see how it sounds just by itself. Okay, so it sounds like it's in a room. There's a lot of low information that's being reverbed. You can cut that out like this. It's the only thing you're hearing is the high splash. You have dry wet here. Your decay time will give you a sense of space. Forever, right? Like you're in space. The thing with EQ is subtlety is key, and same with reverb. Here, look. We're gonna increase it until the decay starts to fade out before the next hit of the snare. A little too long. So it's finishing off before the next one. If you want it to sound spacier, you make it extend past. If you want it to sound tighter, you're gonna bring that reverb and not have it decay so long. So let's listen to it in the context of the mix. Without. With. You almost couldn't hear it. That's why it's important to EQ in context, because I thought it was enough, but it wasn't. Maybe it's because I took up too much low frequency. Maybe it needs to be a little wetter than dry. Maybe it needs to be decayed a little more. So that snare is just adding to that sense of space. And it can be really easy to add too much reverb, add too much delay, add too much compression. These things are very good if used subtly and can be used past the point of its effectiveness very easily. Okay? So a little bit about compression, a little bit about EQ. These are your tools. You have lots of other tools. For example, if you want to compress the whole drum rack, Ableton has this. If you're a DJ or a producer that wants to get their drum track sounding a lot more crisp and bright, use something called parallel compression, and I didn't realize this until recently. I could put a compressor on the drum channel to make it sound like it's all coming off of one mic or been processed, to make the quiet parts of the drums as loud as the loud parts of the drums, but I don't want to overdo it. So I'm not even getting any gain reduction, I'm just using that. And some people say this is the way to do it. You keep bringing your threshold down until you start seeing gain reduction, and that's just the right amount of squash you need. But some people say it's better to not do that, go into the mix and adjust your levels by bringing down the kick drum level like this. See, this thuddiness of this snare was a little too loud. It made the snare sound not as hip-hoppy if I had this too loud. That knock, so I wanted to bring it down in context. So you can hear this one more. So you can compress the whole drum group like this. See, the kick is triggering a lot of it, so you want to make sure that all your instruments are kind of triggering it so that you know that the compressor is touching each one of these instruments with some preference to certain instruments over others. Then, once you have the right amount of compression, don't forget to take it away with this knob until it sounds like it's almost not there. If your compressors sound like they're just about disappearing in the mix, then you've got the compression right. Flat and kind of robotic. Compressed, it sounds like they were meant to be together more. And I've done that using volume. Without. Right? It just feels like there's a little something more there. And then you use that dry wet to take it away until you can just barely hear it. So, without. And right about there, it sounds like I'm doing something to it, so I'm going to move it to just before that. And when you drag your mouse across with the dry wet and you feel that change in your room and you're sitting in that room, when you move that fader up and down, that little dry wet, you're going to feel a resistance, and that's that change in the sound that you're feeling. And it's a very tactile thing, and you're going to come across this like little magic resistance area until it starts feeling like something, and then. And that's an example of parallel compression. Let's listen to it in the mix with and without. Now the drums, since we've compressed it, it's louder than everything else in the mix, and I can't really hear everything. The drums is all you can hear, right? So I like to keep my drum fader at 0 here and change the output here. And look at where the green is moving. You can see how the sound is behaving in relationship to other instruments. The dynamic range is the volatility of that movement. And then the reason why you want to gain stage things nice is, and I didn't realize this till far too late in the game, when your levels are here at this level, see where all the green is, or right about here? Right about here. And the reason why I have them there is because I want to keep my signal away from my fader. And the fader, what I mean by that is these things. Okay? The reason why I want to keep a good distance between your fader and your actual sound signal is that when you have a mix that sounds generally good, right? Like, it's pretty good. So everything's generally in the place where you want it to be. When the fader for this drum is very far from the peak of the drum sound, which is about here, that relationship that we were talking about in music where it's an exponential relationship, when you move your fader near 0, you can move it a lot farther and change the sound a lot less. So you can be a lot finer with your changes. Okay? Okay, that's why you want to keep a good distance from your peak sound to your fader. So if I wanted to adjust it, I can move the fader a lot and get the drums exactly to where I want them. As you can see, when I move this fader, the drum signal doesn't change that much, but that's because of the difference I have in the signal strength. You could also do something like this. You could bring the fader down to here. You could bring your compressor so that it's just hitting top, so that your sound is always at this fader, and then you might be the type of person that likes to have their faders exactly. So I know my drums are exactly here all day long, and I can change it to this later on in the mix. I can use that to fade out, but I want my drums sitting right here in the mix. I want them to be right there. Okay? What I like to do is keep it low, and then so later when I'm done my song, I can go into each one of these channels and just tweak like this, just tweak like that, and just moving just subtly. So these are tricks to keeping your gain, and this is all gain staging like we talked about. Okay, good. And see, when I bring the volume down, that kick starts to get lost. So. And I think it's a little stagnant. So let's get rid of all this. Let's make some variation, just so it sounds different. Sorry. 2 bars. And this is all stuff that you can learn to do on your own, and you'll get quite fluid at over time. So maybe I just want one extra kick. Swung a little bit. Or even later. Just a little variation. Yeah. Okay, so that's that. So we have drum rack, bass guitar, piano, and we're ready to move on.